word and I do what I do. He knows what I'm about to tell him right now. It's Mr. Keep running your mouth. That's what I do.
I just feel like I'm the champ, and at the end of the day, I'm just a fighting motherfucker. Doesn't matter. Inside, outside, I can just fight. So I just feel like if it gets down to the wire, and we gotta lock it up, I'm out on top.
They do their job outside the ring. I'm a fighter. Like I said before, there ain't no safety on the clock, so
So I got a question. I'm a Nautica fan, and I know growing up in high school I was wearing Nautica and Polo, even Timberland. And I know there were times where I even like Nautica cologne, but I know there were times when, you know, they might come out with a design and I'm like, man, they should have did this, they should have did that. But overall, I bought the product. So how much was I a hater then? Was I a hater because I had some criticism about some of the products that they had? I'm just asking. Because in debates these days, especially when it comes to boxing and fans and their favorite fighters and content creators and they idols and people that they got all in their pockets influencing them because they don't want to offend nobody for interviews. But I say this, I bring this up because every time I get into a debate about Devin Haney and how good he is, I'm always labeled as a hater. I'm trying to figure out, how am I a hater when I actually paid for his last fight against Linares by getting the DAZN app just for that fight? I paid for the Gamboa fight, which he had on DAZN. I paid for the Santiago fight. I didn't see the Abdullah fight. I saw the highlights, but I also paid and watched the Moran fight. So for a person that took his money, the number 95 person, I don't have nobody in pocket. I don't get paid a whole bunch of money to do videos and get streams and all this stuff. I'm a 9 to 5 person, a 9 to 5 HVAC technician, and I spend my hard-earned money to support this young man in his fights. But somehow when I got criticism, I'm a hater. Somebody gonna have to explain that to me. What's going on? And this is an edition called Devin, I'm not turning water to wine right now, Haney. And I want to start because this is a thing that I'm going through where I try to be as unbiased as possible. And this is the Body Work Boxing Podcast, where we don't take things for face value. We got to do our body work. You know, some of my favorite boxers actually had the best body work. And, you know, on another level, we got to go beyond the physical, and we got to state what the name actually entails. It's body work. So we got to do our body work. And I'm finding myself bumping heads with a lot of people who I thought were pro-black, a lot of people who I thought were for black people and stood on a principle. But I'm seeing that when a race card is not convenient, we often resort to tribalism. And what's tribalism? Tribalism, it argues the merits of a fighter. You know, just like old media outlets have done for years. And what old media did for years was they spurned new age content creators to have a voice because they were tired. The old stale ways of grouping together and pushing for an agenda behind their favorite fighter was once a catalyst to develop a voice, but it soon turned into the weapon of choice when that said fighter failed to deliver on a performance justifying a dreamy moniker like Black Jesus. We gotta be real. There is no Black Jesus. Just not. There's just not one. And to have a moniker like that, you wonder why you get such criticism. But when a Black Jesus has a lackluster performance, like Devin Haney, we gotta keep it $1. What happens most of the time is when that fighter has a lackluster performance, they then elevate the capabilities of the opponent and call all who state that they weren't as sold on the fighter the ever popular hater. I'm always getting told I'm a hater when it comes to this dude. What then follows is a bunch of illegitimate comparisons to other fighters. They hate on his peers and 1,000 videos to defend Dev's performance. We gotta stop this. How does a fighter with one less fight than Errol Spence get touted as the best thing since sliced bread when this was his second step-up fight? That's question number one. Most recently, the last fighter was the first inside of the top 10 in his division. It's my opinion that we really need to put the brakes on crowning Devin as the best when he hasn't fought and beat the best. In his last 2 step-up fights, he hasn't even dropped them, and they passed their prime as veterans. Not to mention, he currently campaigns at 135 and will be going to 140 pounds, where there's already some battle-tested, highly skilled, balanced, offensive and defensive fighters already waiting. I believe they licking their chops. What I can say is that Dev, he has a great dedication to the sport, and he lives a boxer's lifestyle. I do give him credit for that. He's definitely a gym rat. He has a great jab variety. The jab is one of his strongest attributes. I also saw some excellent body work, which really surprised me. Like, I really have to look at some of our current fighters and say, hey, who's putting in that body work like that? And it's only a few. We got Earl, who's the body snatcher, who I think he's number one. We got Canelo, who he's definitely going to the body. But Dev is up there as far as his body work. I was surprised that Linares wasn't dropped from some of his body work. And I would say that Dev has great speed. He even demonstrated great head movement and good footwork for most of the fight. I walked away after seeing his last performance thinking that his footwork can be better, because footwork has a lot to do with putting an opponent away. It's foot placement, where you got balance and leverage to be able to land the kind of shots that you want to get your person up out of there. And at this point, it's much like LeBron and how he was criticized when people used to say he didn't have the ability to seal a deal. He didn't have that killer instinct, is what they called it. They'd often say that unlike MJ and Kobe, King James couldn't seal the deal. And I believe he's going to need that. He's going to have to seal the deal. Before he gets over the hump like LeBron did, he's going to have to figure it out. What I think his best move would be, which is to accentuate his positives in building his body work, is to fight off the great jab. The jab, he has a very great jab. I won't deny it. Can I say it's the best in the division? No, I can't. But it's great. It's something that he can build on. It's a foundation. I kind of go at odds with whether or not he should abandon the shoulder roll. I don't think that the shoulder roll is necessary for everybody. I think a lot of people try to mimic Floyd and try to do it, but I think it's something that you kind of have natural, to where if you don't start off doing it, or if you're trying to mimic somebody without the natural abilities to be able to use it, then it can be a detriment. But I think he should abandon the shoulder roll. I think he should develop a high guard. And against premier boxers like a Tank or a T.O., all it is going to take is one mistake, because they had those fast twitch muscles. And with that shoulder roll, you don't have anything up there defending you. So if they study some film and they can see that when you like to use it and some of your tendencies, then it's going to take one mistake. And that's it. But I reason that if Linares can hurt him with a 3-piece, as a hard-hitting combination type fighter, I'm thinking it's gonna be good night Irene if Tank or T.O. or somebody like Regis, who have demonstrated concussive one-punch knockout power. It's gonna be a good night. So where it seems like I'm hating, I still believe that Dev has a huge upside. He's not quite turning water into wine, and he's not performing any real miracles. He's not necessarily walking on water right now. I think he's young and he has a lot of potential. And as a fan, what I want is for him to turn that potential into kinetic. And I'm not sure that he's the best down there. I think he's third behind Tank and T.O., with Shakur he pretty much about to leapfrog the division. I love to see him with a trainer of the likes of Derrick James or Kevin Cunningham, and what they could turn him into. And all I admire Dev and what his father's been able to achieve. I just think that he has a lot of work that he has to put in to be put up there with the names and the likes of a Sugar Ray, a Roy Jones, a Pac-Man, a Mayweather anytime soon. He need to make an example out of one of his peers. And I think that's where we need to pretty much start. If he can do that, if he's able to actually make an example out of somebody in his peer group before he moved to 140, I would give him much more credit. As early as today, I found myself going back and forth with somebody who I look up to. They had their own channel. They're definitely making moves in the market of the podcast area, and you know, more specifically the boxing podcast area. And I found myself having to teeter-totter between getting disrespectful and actually trying to get this individual to engage with me on a conversation about Devin. And what I found is people love to use the race card. People love to say they pro-black and, you know, they stand on this and they solid. And, you know, this particular individual who has a criminal past, I was thinking that, okay, let's play by penitentiary rules. Penitentiary rules dictate that it's respect at all costs. You're going to respect me. But right away, when I pointed out something, I was called a weirdo. They even played the mind game trying to tell me that I like my own comment. That was their first thing. And that's why I know when I get in somebody's head and they flustered already off the jump. It's like that jab, that stifling jab. I hit him with a jab and he couldn't regroup. So his only option was to resort to some like low blows. Basically saying I like my own comment, calling me a weirdo, which one, I didn't like my own comment. I just asked the question. Because when I look at it, I see a lot of the smoke and mirrors. And this is part of the body work. This is the Body Work Boxing Podcast. And what I did was I illustrated an example, because what's going on right now is there's a lot of people saying that, okay, since T.O. signed this new deal, there's no way he's going to fight Devin because Bob is basically going to get in the way. And pretty much what they're trying to say is that Bob is basically going to want options on Devin if he allows him to fight T.O. So I said, okay, if that's the narrative that's being put out there, let's go back. Let's do some body work. Let's dig deep and do some body work. And I said, okay, but what happened with Gary Russell Jr.? Or should I say Mr. Gary Russell Jr.? Not too long ago, last year, Dev and Mr. Gary Russell, who Devin wasn't even on Mr. Gary Russell's radar. He jumped into a beef between Gary and Bud, jumped out there and said, oh, we'll pay you the money. And that was supposed to be $2 million. So Gary said, okay, well, cool. Shoot me the $2 million and I'm going to spark your little ass. So Dev say, oh, well, nah, well, it's going to be $1 million. And I followed it because I'm not a casual. Even though I have a 9-to-5 in boxing, I can't be on here and I don't get paid. I don't have the viewership and all that, but I follow it because I love boxing. I love boxing and football. So I entertained it and I dug deep and I followed the thing as it played out. Okay, but what we saw was, one, Dev already had a venue locked in with Gamboa. That's fact number one. Factory. The man already had a venue locked in with Gamboa. I want to go back and do the research and see when Gamboa actually signed the contract. But they entertained Gary Russell and they made the shenanigans trying to build a name. He was going on all kind of platforms, and in the process, they shitted on my man Gary Russell. And they was trying to make it look like he was ducking. And Gary Russell is the longest reigning champ right now. And he bring that heat. He dropped Lomachenko, but they don't even give him credit for it. But he is a supreme boxer. And he has power. He's very experienced. So I was looking for that fight to happen. But what they tried to do was, they tried to paint Gary like he was ducking. But what they did was, the first thing they did was offer Gary $2 million. Then they went to $1 million. And Gary was like, and then they offered, Gary said, let's do it for $2 million. They said, okay, cool. Then they said, oh, well, let's do it for $1 million. Gary said, look, I wanted $2 million because that's what Bud was getting ready to give his opponent at the time. So he said, I want to do it for $2 million. You said $2 million. So then they said, nah, I want. So Gary said, you know what, shorty? Since you really want this smoke, I'm going to spark your little ass for $1 million. Okay, so they sent over some terms and it was for $1 million. But along with those terms, they wanted options on Gary to fight for a couple more fights. And I'm not privy to be in the background and see how it all works, but Gary was like, nah, I had my people read over this contract, this bullshit. I'm not going to get down for that. Because first you made me come down off my price for $2 million, which was a bargain basement deal. Now you want $1 million, and now you want terms. Like, no way, Jose. And then this contract is some bullshit because your peoples ain't even signed off on it. Right? So let's fast forward to last night. Well, yesterday it comes out that T.O. actually has a contract. And he re-upped his contract with Bob, which was surprising to me. Because Bob was going to put him on that slave ship like he do all his other people. And basically what the narrative being painted now is that the fight is never going to happen between T.O. and Devin because basically they saying that Bob is going to want options on Dev for like 2 more fights, 2 or 3. Don't quote me, but he's going to want options, point blank, period. So me, Dealing with this person I told you about who I had a conflict with, who I thought was real cool, who with a criminal background I thought would play by penitentiary rules. First he come out and disrespect me. And that's okay, but I support his channel, donated to the channel, comment, whatever. I'm just one viewer, but yes, I contribute to the views, because a lot of time when I'm in work and I'm moving from location to location, I'm probably pop in. If they live, I'll check in, I'll comment, I'll add to the discussion, I'll try to contribute because I support my people. This dude, first he disrespected me, then I said, okay, so what's the difference between what Devin did to Gary versus what Top Rank getting ready to try to do to Dev? So first he called me a weirdo. Then he tried to say that I'm liking my own videos, which I did not. So I'm like, okay, this is some bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, this is what we resort to. When you can't have an intellectual conversation, you can't have respectful dialogue, you resort to low blows, hitting below the belt. So I could have got all belligerent or whatever, but I just said, look, I'm just asking one question. It's like, how can you basically be the pot calling the kettle black when the fighter that you dick riding in Devin Haney is doing the same thing or has done the same thing to another well-respected black champion? Gary Russell is a dude who nobody really wants to fight. It's so hard for this man to get a fight. So now, like, him and his brothers basically pretty much like locking people in. They putting people between a rock and a hard place to where he in one division, his brother in the other division. So you gotta go see one of them at some point. That's what it's resorted down to, because nobody really want that smoke. He's perhaps the most avoided fighter in boxing. So I question the man about what's going on and how you gonna take Devin's side and you painting the same narrative like, oh, the fight never gonna happen because Bob gonna want options on him. But you just did that to a black man. But you supposed to be a black channel supporting black fighters. And then it got me to thinking. I said, when was the last time Devin afforded another black fighter an opportunity to make a payday with him? Because if you look at the Gary Russell fight, that would have been a passing of the torch or a changing of the guard. So if Devin was able to overcome Gary Russell, that would have made a statement. Because Gary Russell was well respected. You know, that would have been a payday for a black fighter. That would have been you cementing your legacy by beating Mr. Gary Russell Jr. That didn't happen. Why? Because Gamboa was already in the bag. But they went on numerous channels. His father. And I used to say that, oh, well, you know, maybe I'm unnecessarily hating on Devin. Even though I'm not hating on Devin, I just say that I don't see anything special. That's not hate. That's just being real. You see something special in a fighter like Tank. You see something special in a fighter like Wilder. You see something special in somebody like Jamel, Charlo. Like, they special. It's just obvious. It's like, if you don't know shit about boxing and you go in and you watch one of their fights, you be like, damn, that dude, he's special. I just don't see anything special. Does he have the ability to be one of the best? Yes, he does. But that's what I was talking about earlier when I said potential versus kinetic. We want to see some of that potential be kinetic. And I don't know if these guys are getting, like, if they in pocket or they get some kind of incentive or because it's the amount of views or getting interviews, but it's just getting ridiculous in the fact that you paint these narratives like this is why this is happening because such and such is using this tactics, but you use the same tactics against your own. So the dude basically, he responded back to me because I told him I thought we was better than that. So he comes back like, oh yeah, you said I thought we was better than that. I know what happened in that situation. He don't elaborate. He don't say anything. He just leave me hanging. And I'm like, I told him, I said, look, I support your channel. But this is nothing new because one of my favorite channels, one who I got a wrench on, we've gotten into it, and I've never seen. It's only certain instances where I see this dude get so sensitive about this one boxer in Devin Haney that I'm like, this is ridiculous. How much are they paying you? What are they doing for you? It's like, don't you know they don't care about you because you're not getting anything exclusive? Bill Haney basically pimped the like list in the name of his son by going on every channel. Anybody who will give him an opportunity to be able to speak on, he goes on spitting the same old rhetoric, and then you start digging in the trenches and doing that body work. And speaking of body work, I'm getting ready to get into some real body work, for real. Because this shit gotta stop. It gotta stop. And since the title of the show was Body Work Boxing, I just want to go ahead and get into some body work. When I think about body work, I'm thinking about some things that's like deep. Some stuff that's down inside. That's guts. And you got to talk about character. I know when you talk to a lot of boxers and you know you watch a lot of the interviews, you hear them when they talk about sparring and what happens in sparring is supposed to stay in sparring. But one of the things with that, what he got to stop doing is stop bragging about the spar wars. It's hurting you. Because you're not supposed to be talking about it. Because what happened in sparring is supposed to stay in sparring. And then when you do that, you talk about how you knocked this person out and you was able to beat the shit out of this person and that person or whatever, and then you come up under the big bright lights and you oversell, and because you do a good job, but you don't provide what you said you was going to provide in a knockout, then it makes you look bad. So I would say stop overselling what you can do. I'm not even saying be humble, because that's having a low value of self-worth. So I'm not telling you to be humble. I'm saying just stick to, we're going to have a good fight, I'm going to put on a good performance, and just stick to that. Because it's talking about sparring, talking about you're going to knock out somebody, you're going to beat somebody up worse than ever before, like Gamboa, which that didn't happen. And we got to talk about integrity. Integrity is very important as well, because I know after the Gamboa fight, it came out that supposedly Dev had a broke hand. And that information should have never came out. But everybody gave Lomachenko, all this empathy or sympathy because he had a bad shoulder, and beforehand he was supposed to be in the best shape of his life. But then it comes out after the Gamboa fight that supposedly Dev had a broken hand, and that's why he didn't deliver the knockout, and he was going to deliver the knockout against Linares. But that didn't happen. And then after the post-fight interview, he was asked about when he got hurt by Linares. And the young man got up there and said he never got hurt. That's integrity. The whole world saw you get hurt. So if the whole world see you get hurt, and then you get in front of everybody and say you never got hurt, how are we supposed to believe all this stuff that you saying in sparring? How are we supposed to believe that you want to fight the best? In the post-fight interview, in the press conference, the reporter asked him, so, in regards to your next fight, who would you like to fight? He said something to the nature he want to fight the best. So then the reporter asked him about Tank. And he said, what belt does he have? I was like, what belt does he have? Like, Mr. Gary Russell had a belt. But that wasn't good enough. So we didn't see Gary when we saw you fight Gamboa. You didn't double back and fight Gary once again. But then we see you fight Linares. What belt did Linares have? And so this is coming from a guy who likes to call everybody Mr. Cap. Now I only experienced this when it comes to like two fighters. And since this one is about Dev, we just gotta call a spade a spade. Everything is not about race when it comes to Dev. Especially when this is in-house. When black people are talking amongst themselves about fighters and boxers and everything else, is like the race card goes out the window. It really does. So I'm thinking that the young man, he got a lot of potential. He has a ways to go. He has an opportunity to do what anybody else in the sport that achieved the level of greatness has done. Just got to work on some things. And his fans just got to relax. Nobody's hating on him. But if he work on these things, he get himself together and, keep being a gym rat, keep developing skills, and just be a straight up and down dude. He hasn't been in any trouble, which is good. I salute him. I commend him. Excellent young man. But as far as boxing, man, let's just keep it a buck. Nobody hate Dev. I wish the young man luck, good fortune. I hope he go on to do a lot of great things. And I'm being sincere. But if I didn't care, I wouldn't take none of my time out to address these things. It's just I deal with this so much instead of like going back and forth with people on YouTube, then I could just refer to this video. And if they don't have the time or the patience to sit down and listen to what I'm saying logically and understand where I'm coming from, then I guess it won't be worth arguing anymore. But I appreciate everybody who was able to make it to the end of this podcast, and this was the Bodywork Boxing Podcast with your boy, Mike Rogers. Peace.
I do what I do. He knows what I'm about to tell him right now. It's Mr. Keep running your mouth. That's what I do.
I just feel like I'm the champ, and at the end of the day, I'm just a fighting motherfucker. It doesn't matter. Inside, outside, I can just fight. So I just feel like if it gets down to the wire, and we gotta lock it up, I'm out on top.
They do that job outside the ring. I'm a fighter. Like I said before, there ain't no safety on the clock, so